Devastating news at the Overwatch community this week from the Activision Blizzard shareholder meeting, where it was revealed Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2 will be delayed. But if you've been following this channel closely this past year, not only should that not really be too much of a surprise, but I'd hope you begin to realize that when it comes to Blizzard, you can take nothing at face value. As Blizzard seems to indicate in one direction, they denied the Metro leaks by saying next season of the Overwatch League would be played on an early build of Overwatch 2, but then they tell shareholders they're taking extra time before releasing the game. Back in April, Jeff Kaplan left the company with basically no fanfare from Blizzard, despite a super long list of accomplishments for the company. He was the vice president, and his goodbye message was like a tweet. New leadership goes to the media and downplays the necessity of a figurehead like Jeff, talks about how it takes a full village of developers to develop a game, and they're right on track, nothing to be worried about. But the truth always comes out at the shareholder meetings. The main reason they cited for Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2 being delayed was change of leadership. Which one is it, Blizzard? Trying to have things both ways and all the doublespeak is driving your boy insane. So this news broke a couple days ago, but I wanted to take some time to look through the past year of information to try to make sense of this nonsense. But first, a message from today's video sponsor, Keeps. Overwatch fans, if you're anything like me, following Blizzard's poor decisions year after year certainly makes you mauled, but you don't have to suffer the same fate that I did. You can get ahead of your hair loss with Keeps Preventative Services right now. With Keeps, a licensed doctor will review your information and give you a specialized treatment plan, with treatment shipped to your door every 3 months. You can message your doctor 24/7 and track your progress with Keeps Progress Tracking tool. The most important thing to remember when it comes to hair loss, there is no instant fixes, but as long as you start your prevention early, you can start to see results in 4 to 6 months. So get ahead of it before you end up like me. The earlier you act, the more hair you can save. If you want to learn from my mistakes, click our link in the description to head on over to keeps.com/youroverwatch and use our link so you can get 50% off your first order. Don't delay, start your hair loss treatment plan with Keeps today. So first of all, framing the situation, the announcement of the delays of these games do not come lightly. Luckily, I think it's the right thing to do. I'm going to have a lot of negative critical things to say about Blizzard, but being honest about the integrity of your product and prolonging its development until it's good is a good thing, and they deserve praise for that. Far better than to release a Warcraft 3 Reforged, or perhaps even worse, a Cyberpunk style situation. We don't want that on top of everything else going wrong with Blizzard. You gotta stop the bleeding now and begin doing the right thing. What isn't reasonable, though, is the nonsense PR talk that makes following this game impossible, as we never seem to get straight answers to very reasonable questions like, what have you been working on all this time? Trying to regain a level head on this. There is a lot still open that I think most of the media covering this hasn't asked the relevant follow-up questions on. What do these terms mean? So as an example, there's a quote from the shareholder meeting. We are still planning to deliver a substantial amount of content from Blizzard next year. From an Overwatch player's point of view, it's difficult to figure out what these words actually mean. Do they mean more skins for Overwatch? Or could it be more than that? Let's put a pin in that idea for now. We'll come back. Although Jason Schreier, who has inside sources at Blizzard, seemed to be confident that the games wouldn't be out in 2022. Just yesterday, Andy B, the community manager, went to the forums saying, here, one rumor to clear up. I'm seeing a lot of folks assuming a launch date in 2023 is rote. I want to point out that there is no release date or beta date communicated in yesterday's earning call. While I'm not prepared to discuss dates with you here today, I wanted to quash the rumor of a 2023 release date as being somehow official. So that's a really good point. Previously to this point, it seems safe to speculate that they were aiming for, let's say, summer-ish of next year, 2022, to release at least Overwatch 2, and a delay, quote-unquote, could put it into Q4, or let's say a year from now. Either way, I want to point out and remind you of the commentary we put on the previous Metro leaks, which, again, felt like we were kind of alone in this opinion, but it turns out Metro was right. His leak was he heard from multiple people close to his original source, that with Overwatch 2, the development is taking longer than expected. From what I can gather, a release in 2022 does not seem likely anymore. I hope this is false and I'm proven wrong. People were really unfair to Metro on this when the official announcement of an early build of Overwatch 2 came out, saying that the pros will be playing it come April of next year. But then the more information we get, seems like they haven't even begun the 5v5 PvP overhaul. That's what it seems like, because when we ask what they still have left to do, they flat out admit they have to rework all of the heroes in time for that. They had shown us 2 at the Overwatch League Grand Finals, reworks to Bastion and Sombra, but still didn't know how they were going to, say, balance McCree without a stun, or how all the characters are basically going to need to be different in order to follow the new rule set and somehow be balanced, which is just a pipe dream and definitely not gonna happen. But either way, this leads us to the extremely confusing decision to guarantee that you're going to have an early build for the Overwatch League, but also admit that the release will be delayed. This tweet from Liz Richardson says they got to speak to Overwatch League PR, and their answer is, what's cool is the next season of Overwatch League will give the community a fantastic view into the development team's planned direction for the franchise before experiencing the content for themselves. Wow. I feel like I'm at an amusement park because the spin on this tweet is making me want to hurl. Where's this PR person from? Six Flags? Did they used to manage a tilt-a-whirl? This is insane. Trying to make it seem like you, the fans, should be excited to watch pro players play a game for an entire season that you won't have access to. Not to mention then, of course, from a pro player's point of view, who else are they going to play? How are they going to practice? Who's going to be invited to whatever pre-release beta? If you're a newer Overwatch fan, you might not know that back in 2015, there was an era of time called Only Watch, where only a select few of Blizzard-sanctioned streamers and content creators and former pros from Team Fortress 2, etc., got into the Overwatch 1 beta. It's likely a similar type of thing is going to happen with Overwatch 2. And here's the thing. It's totally reasonable for the game not to be done yet. But what is unreasonable is when this company constantly makes decisions in order to serve one group over another. So for example here, because they mismanaged the timeline of Overwatch's development, they have to scrap together some kind of 5v5 build so the pros play on something that can hold some viewership value for Overwatch League. When the community has major concerns, when the player base has major concerns, when anybody has major concerns that isn't an Overwatch League franchise owner or the shareholders, it seems like barely make an impact in their decision making. If I can try to put some sort of positive spin on this, the only way that I think that this could be good is if they've done far more than what they've shown us. Because if all they have truly is they've tried 2 new reworks and they've got to do the rest of the cast and rebalance everything, how are they going to get that done? Not just by April, but before April in time for the pros to play. That has all the makings of a joke of a competitive format, just because you want to put Overwatch 2 on the banner as like a marketing campaign for the next game, destroying competitive integrity just because they couldn't meet the deadline. And none of that would be too much of a problem if they just kept updating Overwatch 1 like any other live service game does in the rest of the industry. But that's not what Blizzard wanted to do. They wanted to make their own rules. And now because those decisions were made so long ago, it seems like it's difficult for them to make the decision that's like the elephant of the room to anybody who's paying attention, that they gotta just move to free to play and bite the bullet. But they've doubled down on this strategy so hard, I almost feel like I'd be surprised if they all of a sudden would do the obvious thing. If Overwatch 2 has a handful of new maps and a handful of new characters, that isn't enough from the PvP point of view. That is just the rate of development of any other live service game. That just puts us at par with them. And oh yeah, by the way, we've been starved for content this whole time. So just packaging it together and being like, yay, Overwatch 2, why should the community accept that when you could have kept up on the game this whole time and dealing with concerns that we had instead of what seems to be having them all ignored until the sequel comes out so you can bundle it into a bigger sticker price? I don't know what excuses excuses they have for this, to be honest. When you look at Overwatch 2 gameplay, does it look like we need an entirely new engine to have a new map, a robot, and remove a tank? They updated the UI, they added sound effects, they added all sorts of little bibs and bobs, but their constant desire to control the message always backfires on them. So much so I don't know why they keep doing it. It's confusing. To remind you, at the grand final, when Aaron Keller was interviewed during the show match, he stated that all 32 heroes will be playable for Overwatch 2's early build, and he seemed to indicate that includes all the reworks they have yet to do. So like 4 months, basically, to do that. And on top of that, a few more heroes will be added. So that's where we'll finally start to see whatever new content they had ready all this time for Overwatch 2. But the real question is, when will anybody else get to play it? And I think if you stop to think about this, there's a few ways that this plays out. Option 1, Overwatch never goes free to play. They play the entirety of next Overwatch League season as a marketing campaign for the next version of Overwatch 2, expecting more people to tune in to see the new game. They want to emulate the kind of hype success that Valorant had. Maybe they even give away beta codes at random for people who are watching. Then maybe later on that year or early the next year, to the delayed point, Overwatch 2 finally releases, and Overwatch 1 probably goes on a reduced price for just the multiplayer. And if you want all the Overwatch 2 stuff, the full featured game, that'll be at a higher price. So for all the RPG content that they're making. Another option, let's call this option 2. If at the launch of the game, they wanted to make Overwatch 1 free to play, which would include all the free to play microtransactions that a lot of people don't like, but also allows for games to be continuously updated due to the revenue model. My question is, if that is in the plan to happen by the time they release Overwatch 2, why don't they make free to play sooner rather than later? What are they waiting on? It's either they think that they can make more money on the box product model, or there's still some old head Blizzard people at the company who really hate free to play. Listen, there's good reasons for it. A lot of you in the comment section always tell me how much you hate free to play and how happy you are that Overwatch isn't. But by the numbers, I think you can see the difference in the support that these free to play live service games get versus one that they can just decide to turn off the content stream when the income dries up. At least me personally, I want to keep playing a game that's supported. I prefer it going free to play, big time. I think the boxed model is more friendly to those who want to have like a good year with the game, but for those of us that want to dedicate long-term to it, free to play is better. And I'd argue of the 5 years of Overwatch being out, the last 2 has had the best balancing, but also the least amount of content. Imagine if we had this fast rate of balancing also with content. Then we could have a hype game. And I emphasize this point because I think they left the door open to the free-to-play move to be next year. I know this is optimistic thinking from me, and perhaps is too generous of an idea for them to do, but because it seems so dumb for them to have a Overwatch League season on the game that isn't out yet, when it was ready, would it be in the cards for them to update the multiplayer version of Overwatch first on live, sending it free to play and whatever stuff they have worked on, kicking us into 5v5 so we all can just play 5v5? I mean, what's the huge difference? Like having all this mismatch and this awkward timing where we're kind of like admitting Overwatch 1 is dead, but we're waiting for the next thing, but it only looks like they're changing a couple things anyway, so why don't they just do it now? It's all really confusing, right? And a relevant argument that a lot of community members have made is, how long are they willing to wait? How low of interest do you want to see the monthly average users for Overwatch to go until you make a decision like this to move up and rejuvenate this game with content? It feels weird for me to say, actually, because I've really enjoyed playing the game in the past year or so. I think the competitive balancing makes the game very challenging, and really, personally, I just need a few features that are like quality of life and competitive integrity minded, whether it's the competitive format or more competitive modes. Even with all those complaints, the base gameplay I'm still in love with, and I just wish more people could see the good state it's in. And my fear is, if they mismanage this there's a chance that they either kill off all the positive momentum they've made with recent good decisions by tying themselves down to bad decisions they made years ago. I said this in my previous video where I went at great length to, I guess, forecast the impending doom that was around the corner in some ways, where I'm like, hey guys, where's all the content? It doesn't seem like they have a lot done, does it? Oh my God. Like, I feel like I knew all of this deep down, right? Speaking from the heart. Like, it doesn't seem like they're far enough along to get this done. Yeah, no kidding, right? Okay, so to put a bow on that point, I still think there's plays for them to make that seemingly incredibly dumb decision look like a better decision, but they're leaving the option open. I don't know how much we should read into Andy's points and how much even Andy knows when Andy's like, well, we don't actually know when the beta's out, wink, wink. Is he saying there might be good news surrounding this? I'm trying to find ways that we could feel less sour about this. And I think if there was a beta during the Overwatch League with a bit of a schedule towards when the integrations might happen and perhaps integrating some of them into Overwatch 1 as they're ready. Or, I don't know, just telling us what they are. Like, okay, we've got all these cool features that are coming out. They'll launch with Overwatch 2. Because at the moment, it seems like you've got nothing. That's what it looks like, because you're so secretive with everything. When they finally did drop a big PvE update at BlizzCon Online, I was kind of blown away. But there's like no signs of life in the PvP department, and until there is, it almost looks like a downgrade. Last points for the video, I wanted to think a little bit more carefully about the mismanagement of all this and a bit more into the doublespeak, as I think it helps add a layer of analysis to everything else going on. So let's think back to what Jeff Kaplan represented for Overwatch and as well Blizzard. I want to point out that the lawsuits in California were known by the company for years. So that was like a bubbling undercurrent that they knew about. It reaching the head that it did maybe took them off guard, but they were cooperating with the investigation prior to that point. So they knew that was a thing. They had already been addressing some of these Blizzard concerns, having fired Afrasabi, who is maybe the king of the pigs over there. Now, this past year, they've said around 20 employees that were deemed problematic in a similar light have been let go. And although it seems like Jeff Kaplan has a spotless record in terms of the abuse, the thing that I don't see anybody in the media tie together is Blizzard's poor prior mismanagement when it comes to development. And here's how I want to describe it. When you are a developer rock star who essentially built PC gaming, any actions you take are beyond criticism. That can manifest in ugly, abusive ways, but also in mundane mismanagement ways. Because who are you to criticize how long it takes us to do anything? One of my favorite quotes from the lawsuit is, "Do you know who you're speaking to?" Which is sort of a, look at the records on the wall. Look at the statue in the middle of Blizzard campus. You know who built that? I did. So guess what, you hundreds or thousands of other people working at the company, or even how they have an attitude towards the community feedback for their games. You stop over to the World of Warcraft community, it's like we're playing the same game, right? Overwatch players and WoW players, it's all the same problems. It's actually uncanny how similar it is. And that's because the rot with old Blizzard and their rockstar attitudes towards their developers permeates this struggle and is an undercurrent in the mismanagement every step of the way. And this is something that I've perceived as being something that a lot of Blizzard fans and especially Overwatch fans really struggle to swallow, because so much of our identity as gamers is wrapped in to our connection to Blizzard games. I understand that as well as anybody. Blizzard games were my childhood and my adulthood. I didn't plan on covering Blizzard games full time as a career. It just happened naturally because I loved them so much anyway. So it isn't easy for me to swallow the guys that made some of the greatest games of all time might be sort of painted in this gross, arrogant, negative light. But this is the way the world works, folks. People are complicated, and you gotta face facts. I say all that to say this next question. If Blizzard and Team 4 really thought everything Jeff Kaplan did was perfect, wouldn't they try to emulate that again? And another question, if everything was perfect, would Jeff Kaplan ever leave to begin with? You don't let a guy like Jeff Kaplan go easily after what he's accomplished. That should have been a big deal, and it was hard to know how to make sense of it back then, but I think now that we've seen a bigger picture and more evidence of the mismanagement and evidence of them changing things now that he's gone, who's to say? Did Overwatch 2 have a reset at any point if it's taking this long? Was there hills Jeff Kaplan was willing to die on for the direction of the game that he eventually got outvoted on, so he left? Did Blizzard feel like he was mismanaging the property and not getting things done fast enough? Did the team disagree with what he felt for the game? And personally anyway, knowing human psychology a little bit, I think usually people want to work things out until they start to feel disrespected and not heard. I mean, Overwatch is a complicated game. A lot of the devs have a lot of different opinions and they get along anyway, and they eventually just decide on a direction and go. It's no big deal. If one or multiple parties feels like they're not getting their fair say, that's where breakups happen. When Mike Morhaime stepped down from Blizzard, there was a big speech, made a big deal at BlizzCon. When Jeff Kaplan stepped down, he left a comment, "Yo, it's been real, GG." Like, you serious? I've read breakup texts that had more passion than that. So all in all, I think there's more to this story. More that I'm almost positive will eventually come out. And to these questions, I don't really care where you come down on it with blame. You can either say that, well, Jeff wanted 100% good things and Activision's evil, so he left because of that. Or you could say, well, we know the old Blizzard crowd can be a bit toxic in some ways. Maybe he wanted to take the leadership in a direction that other people didn't want, either Activision or maybe even his own team. Okay, calm down. I'm not saying facts. I'm not leaking anything. I'm just asking questions because the evidence is starting to stack up into revealing more about that conflict that must have existed. Because if there was no conflict, then the vice president of your company, a crucial developer for building World of Warcraft, the game you stake your entire reputation on, and the guy who led the project of Overwatch 1, which was a gaming sensation, the only shooter game to win Game of the Year, 50 million copies sold, and let's remember the development process of that, shall we? Jeff Kaplan was leading Team 4 to build what essentially was the MMO to replace World of Warcraft, ideally for Blizzard, Project Titan. They worked on it for 7 years. According to Wikipedia, they scrapped it in 2013, acknowledging that it wasn't going anywhere. And then in about 2-ish years, because that's when the Overwatch 1 beta came out, it released in 2016, but in a very short space of time, they turned around Overwatch 1. Everything that we love, the core of that game was built in that time. And I think this is indicative to a few things. One, Blizzard takes an inordinate amount of time to develop when they're under the old Blizzard philosophy, because back then they were swimming in World of Warcraft money. That's what you have to understand. World of Warcraft at its peak generated outrageous amounts of revenue. So much so that taking 7 years to R&D a gamble of repeating it was justifiable until it wasn't. My buddy SVB had an awesome tweet reminding us about the history of development time. For some context, the longest game stuck in development hell ever that actually eventually did come out was Duke Nukem Forever at 15 years of development. Second to that is Diablo 3, which had a whopping 11 years of development. And Blizzard has a second game in the top 10 with StarCraft 2 with 7 years of development. Overwatch 2 would only need 6 years of development to make this somewhat infamous list, because they had already been saying that they were reducing their workload for Overwatch 1 in 2018. Yeah, did you forget that? Yeah, new heroes kept coming out and we got Echo in 2020, but they had already largely shifted focus to Overwatch 2 once they shipped the Retribution event which was their almost test case scenario for Overwatch in a serious PvE mission. And they said, well, let's make a whole game dedicated to that. This seems to work. And I'm like searching for context with this because I'm like, how long should development take? I mean, I don't know. Creativity isn't really something that can be done on a schedule because 2 years of brilliance made Overwatch 1, but it came after 7 years of a product failing to launch. Is that justified? Well, I think some people in that process might say yes. But for those of us looking for results, waiting a lifetime for something that might have a bit more straightforward of an answer rather than needing to reinvent the wheel, we might not want to wait 10 years for another game to come out. I mention this because I think it's fair to say that Overwatch 2's PvE content would have been a massive undertaking. It wasn't just a multiplayer game with X number of heroes and some maps, but they did add hundreds of developers in order to build Overwatch 2, and they've been working for a while now. And it seems like the PvE section of the game, based on BlizzCon Online, is pretty far along. A big portion of my previous video on my concerns for Overwatch 2's PvP was about the format. And my continued concern now, based on knowing these leaks were accurate and having no clue where they're at or where they even seem to be headed with PvP, I still just have more questions and uncertainty. It feels to me like rather than address really difficult problems, which is outside their comfort zone, which is to say the competitiveness of Overwatch wasn't really at the forefront of the developers' minds. This isn't even controversial. It's right from interviews with Jeff Kaplan, where he admits and says straight up that although they would always put in tools and assets for competitive players, that's not the core of the development. And yeah, for like a casual game and for most consumers, that's important. They want a fun game. But that exact attitude is what leads to all these years of inability to balance or take the competitive format seriously, because it's not even their goal. And what I think is human nature is the tendency to do is rather than address those concerns head on, why would they have put all this attention into PvP when they could go off and do the thing they really wanted to do, the PvE? And they got all these cool things and ways to have fun with that game, and we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs with PvP like, hey, can we get like a feature? Can you like, I don't know, fix the Smurf problem, make ranked more enjoyable, 100 other things? And we get crickets. All right, it's getting emotional here. I will say, I think they have begun starting in that direction. And I'm feeling this past year, they are beginning to show momentum towards taking creators seriously and showing just that little brief opening of a window into ensuring us confidence in the competitive direction of the game. But I'll just say this, not to put too fine of a point on it, it only happened after Aaron Keller took over. Compare how other studios treat their community and content creators versus how Blizzard does it. They got a lot of catching up to do. And I think hopefully something that we can be excited about changing with now a new identity of Blizzard moving forward. We know all the positives of the old Blizzard, and we know a lot of ugly negatives ones too. I'm excited to see what a new Blizzard might look like. But they got all their work ahead of them. Unfortunately, as Overwatch fans, we're just kind of hooked into this drama, just waiting to play our favorite video game. But meanwhile, all this dysfunction is the actual story we have to cover rather than the content of the game we're ever willing to dig our teeth into. Hey, I guess it's something until The Witcher Season 2 comes out, right? That's more than enough for today's video. I'm sure there'll be more to discuss on this as more information comes out. So to make sure that you get updated on our coverage of the continuing Blizzard drama and Overwatch-related news, be sure to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. Link to the description is today's video sponsor, Keeps. Be sure to click that link so you can get 50% off your first order. If I had any hair left, covering today's video would have made it mauled away already. And if you're starting to feel the stress, you need to order right now. Get ahead of your hair loss before it's too late. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.